Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace and greetings to all. I just wanted to thank everyone, along with welcoming everyone, for coming out here to attend and listen and hopefully to really share and engage in such an important topic, extremely important. And we're really honored and very excited to have our esteemed panelists up here to talk about the crisis of ISIS. I think the title is very nicely put, by the way. It goes really nicely, mashallah. So here I just want to introduce first our panelists, and then they'll each give us, share their thoughts, and then we'll open up to question and answer, inshallah, God willing. Okay, so to start off, first on my right, here we have Brother Salam Al-Mariyati, and we'd just like to give a brief introduction about him. Of course, all of his experience and his work really, we should talk a lot more about that, but we're going to give a brief bio. For the past 24 years, Brother Salam has had the opportunity to speak to his congregations at community-sponsored events, temples, synagogues, churches, high schools, and college campuses. He has written extensively on Islam, human rights, democracy, Middle East politics, the Balkan crisis, and Trans-Caucasus conflict. So definitely, mashallah, he's very well versed. His articles and interviews have appeared on such prominent newspapers as the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times, the Christian Science Monitor, so on and so forth. He's also appeared on radio and TV talk shows as well, including the blending the two, Dennis Miller Show, C-SPAN and NBC. He's also been deeply involved in several interfaith activities. He's also served as the co-chair of Interfaith Coalition to Heal Los Angeles, which formed as a result of the Los Angeles uprising in summer of '92. He also works as an advisor to several political, civic, and academic institutions seeking to understand the role of Islam and Muslims in America and throughout the world. Please, we have Brother Salam, and next on to his right we have Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui. Mashallah, he is the religious director here and imam at the Islamic Society of Orange County. Mashallah, his bio is quite extensive. We're just going to summarize it, of course. He graduated from the University of Medina in Saudi Arabia in 1965 with a degree in Arabic and Islamic Studies. He also received a master's in theology from Birmingham University in England and a PhD in comparative religion from Harvard. Mashallah, he served at many Islamic organizations, but to note, he served as the chairman of the Shura Council of Southern California, an organization representing the Islamic centers, masajid, and organizations in Southern California. And he's the chairman of the Fiqh Council of North America, and that is the fiqh, fiqh is the Islamic law for those who are not aware. And internationally, he's the member of the Supreme Islamic Council of Egypt and the Supreme Council of Mosques in Mecca. Mashallah, he has taught in several universities around the world, but currently he is a professor at the Chapman University. And to his right, we have Brother Hussam Ailouche. And he has been a lifelong human rights activist who is passionate about promoting democratic societies in the US and worldwide, in which all people, including immigrants, workers, minorities, and the needy, enjoy freedom, justice, economic justice, respect, and equality. He took his current position as executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations in California, Southern California, that is CARE, in 1998. He's also appeared on several local, national, and international media programs such as CNN, MSNBC, Al Jazeera, and NPR. He has been interviewed and has written regularly also for a number of national newspapers and local, such as the LA Times and the Orange County Register. He holds a degree in aerospace engineering, that's like my dad, mashallah, from the University of Texas. And finally, but not least, of course, we have Sheikha Muslima Pormal. She just joined us. She was born in North Carolina and raised in San Diego, in California. She received her bachelor's degree in the study of religion and a bachelor's in Middle Eastern Studies from the University of California at San Diego. She was a scholarship student with the Islamic American University and participated in the International Union of Muslim Scholars, the Future Scholars Program in 2008. She completed her bachelor's degree in the College of Sharia, that is the College of Law at Al-Azhar University in Cairo. She also completed 2 years of graduate work at the American University of Cairo in the area of Islamic studies, and she has taught classes and spoken nationally and internationally on Islamic law, ethics, and in a variety of different settings, such as conferences and retreats. She's also the co-founder and scholar in residence of Safa Center for Research and Education. Please welcome all of our esteemed panelists, please. Once again, for those of you who are just joining us, we'd really like to thank you and welcome you to this program, because truly to be educated on such an important subject that's really disturbing Muslims and non-Muslims worldwide, it's very important for us to get some kind of bearing on this issue. So to start off, of course, we'd like to start with Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui, and he will educate us. Please welcome him. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, good.
Warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace and blessings of Allah be upon all of you. Very pleased that you are here this evening. We are living at a very difficult time. Just 2 days ago, the horrible incident happened in France, in Paris. And I want to read a statement that was issued by the Fiqh Council of North America. This is the Islamic Law Council for North America, of which I am the chairman. And the statement says, the Fiqh Council of North America expresses its condolences to the families and friends of the victims of brutal killings in several locations in France from all faith groups. It strongly condemns these horrific and totally unjustifiable acts. Islam does not allow any individual or group to take the law in their own hands and kill any person or group on the ground of real or perceived grievances or even crimes. Islam affirms the sanctity of human life, as mentioned in the Quran 5:30 and 35 and 17:33, and requires due and fair process of law. The Council calls on Muslims everywhere to implement the Quranic command to coexist peacefully and justly with all other communities. Chapter 60, verses 8 to 9, to positively integrate in their societies without isolation or loss of their identities as Muslims. What all need is to promote the spirit of mutual respect of all faiths, convictions, and cultures. All stand to benefit from mutual decency and cooperation for the common good. The Council also calls on governments, media, and civil society to distinguish between the hateful words and actions of a small fringe of any major world religions in contrast to the authentic teachings of such faith groups. Random, irrational, and hateful words or acts of revenge, injustice, or discrimination on the basis of broad religious identification should be equally condemned, as they only aggravate what is already a serious challenge to peaceful coexistence, civility, and the rule of law. We pray for unity, harmony, and mutual understanding and respect all over the world. So this is the statement of the Fiqh Council of North America, which explains clearly our position regarding what happened. So we are what Quran says and what the Prophet said is the time of fitna. Fitna is the trial, confusion, when people do not know what is right and what is wrong. When people say that they are doing things Islamic while they are totally un-Islamic. When they claim that they are Muslim but they may not be Muslims. So it is very important that we understand ourselves as Muslims, what Islam stands for, and also we explain to others, our neighbors, what is Islam. We have to distinguish between Islam as a faith and the phenomena that is called extremist ideology, violent ideology, which is using Islamic names, Islamic terms, but it is totally alien to Islam. ISIS stands for Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. That's what the word ISIS means. And in Arabic, it is called Ad-Dawla al-Islamiyya lil-Iraq wa Sham. Or they say the abbreviation of that is Daesh. It is not Islamic, it is not a state. That's why some people call it organization of ISIS or organization of Islamic State. It's not Islamic State. It is an organization that takes the name Islamic State. And it is important to understand that what this organization is doing. So I'm going to talk about what our scholars have mentioned. On September 24, 126 Muslim scholars from all over the world, they issued a statement outlining in about 20 pages about what this organization is doing and why it is un-Islamic, why it is contrary to the teachings of Islam. So this whole statement is in Arabic and translated in good English with an executive summary. And executive summary has 24 points. And in these 24 points, they have mentioned that what they are doing is not Islam. It is totally forbidden according to Islam. So it is important for us to understand that so that we ourselves do not associate Islam with this group, but we have to understand that this group is kind of a cult that has emerged, and it is causing a lot of problems for Muslims as well as for non-Muslims who have been living there for centuries in Syria and Iraq. First thing is the statement says there are a number of points, but I will summarize because of the time is limited. First thing is that they have killed a lot of innocent people, Muslims and non-Muslims. And it is totally forbidden in Islam to kill any innocent person. The second thing is it is forbidden in Islam to kill emissaries, ambassadors, diplomats, and journalists, and aid workers. And they have done all these crimes. So this is, because of this is not an Islamic group. It is totally against the teachings of Islam. They are using the word jihad. Jihad is a defensive war in Islam. It is not permissible without the right cause, the right purpose, and the right rules of conduct. And they have violated all of them. There is neither a right purpose, nor the right cause, and nor the conduct is right. It is forbidden in Islam to declare people non-Muslims unless he or she openly declares disbelief. They have called many Muslims non-Muslims. And for small reasons. For example, in some places they went and asked people, how many rak'ah you have in Maghrib prayer? Somebody was hesitant, was not able to answer quickly. I mean, people may be frightened and all of these things. They said, you are not a Muslim, and then killed him. Simply because he was not able to give answer quickly about what this. And this is small things they use to kill people. It is forbidden in Islam to harm or mistreat in any way people of other religions, such as Christians, Yazidis, or any other people of any other faith. And they have done that. They have harmed the people, Christian people who've been living there, as churches been there for centuries in that area, and Yazidis have been living for a long time, for thousands of years in this area, and they also tortured them and killed many of them. To reintroduce slavery is forbidden in Islam. Yes, slavery did exist, but by the convention, consensus of all people, universally, it is abolished. And we have to abide by that consensus. So it is abolished by universal consensus, and Muslims have to live by that. Al-Muslimun ala shurutihim. It is forbidden in Islam to force people to convert. Converting somebody to become a Muslim, it is forbidden in Islam. Forcing somebody to accept Islam. It is forbidden in Islam to deny women their rights. And they have done a lot of violation in this area. It is forbidden in Islam to deny children their rights. Actually, they have been forcing children to fight and to take weapons and mistreating them. And they have tying bombs to their bodies so they can go and explode in the areas. It is forbidden in Islam to enact legal punishment without following the correct procedures that ensure justice and mercy. For somebody has found drinking wine, they kill the person. Somebody is doing something else, they kill the person without investigating, without checking out, without following the proper procedures. It is forbidden in Islam to torture people. Torture in any kind is forbidden in Islam. It is forbidden in Islam to disfigure the dead. After killing, they have mutilated the bodies. And all of these things are available on the videos. They have been not only killing people, but they are making videos and showing it to the people, frightening the people. It is forbidden in Islam to attribute evil acts to God. And whatever they do, they say it is God has done that, not we. So that means they are attributing their evil to God. Exalted be His name, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is forbidden in Islam to destroy the graves and shrines of prophets and companions. And they have done many, saying that all is shirk and this all is forbidden in Islam. Armed insurrection is forbidden in Islam for any reason other than any clear disbelief by the ruler and not allowed, who does not allow people to pray. It is also forbidden in Islam to declare a caliphate without consensus of all Muslims. So they call themselves the caliph and caliph of the world and asking all people to have the allegiance to him. Who appointed them as a caliph? Self-proclaimed, self-claimed, all these titles they have been using. And so all because of all these reasons and many others that are there, you can see that this cult, this organization is alien to Islam, is against the teachings of Islam. It is one of the horrible things that have happened. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, indicated that a time will come when people will do a lot of killing. And he said that yaksuru fikum al-haraj. And they said, what is haraj, O Messenger of Allah? He said, al-qatl, al-qatl. The killing is going to increase in the community, among the people. And they said, what is that? What is that? They said, the murders and the murders. And this is what's happening by these kind of people. So it is very important that we understand that. It is very important we bring better understanding of Islam among ourselves and guide the people so that we can live in peace and other people can live in peace. That is the message of Islam. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Muzammil, for clarifying so many misconceptions that are being really unfairly and really confusing a lot of people about ISIS, and that I love the two kind of negations that you just made that kind of just clarify it right from the very beginning. It's not Islamic and it is not a state. So ISIS, even in their self-proclaimed description, is faulty right off the bat. So I appreciate that. Next, we'd like to invite Brother Hossein Mailouche, a representative of CARE, to come and speak to us about ISIS's tactics and how they're attracting the youth. Thank you.
There's barakah in Sheikh Muzammil Zahan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen nabiyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa tabi'een. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful, and may the peace and the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon His Messenger Muhammad and all the prophets before him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and all their families and companions and their followers, and may Allah accept us among their true followers, inshallah. Good to see everyone on a blessed day of Friday. Well, officially we're actually Saturday using the Islamic calendar, but we're extending the day alhamdulillah ta'ala, and we're meeting at one of the best places, the house of worship, one of Allah's houses, the masjid. What I was asked to talk about briefly is maybe the history of ISIS itself. How did it originate? How did it come to existence? So I'll go briefly, and I'm going to talk about some of its factors, and I'm hoping, inshallah, during the Q&A, we'll hear more from you, and I will be able to elaborate more on some of these items. So if something comes up and you think it didn't answer your what's on your mind, or you need an elaboration or even a challenge, feel free to do so, but after, inshallah, during the Q&A. So Daesh, as most Arabs like to call it, because we don't want to give it the privilege of calling it Islamic State, because it is not, as Sheikh Muzammil said, neither Islamic nor a state. Obviously, don't call them Daesh if you run into them in Syria or Iraq, because they'll kill you. They don't like that term. But Daesh originated actually back in 1999. It started as a group called Jama'at al-Tawheed wal-Jihad under Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, if you remember hearing that. At that time, they were not very active. They were trying to have their presence, but they were not that active. They didn't become active until 2004, right after the US invasion of Iraq in 2003, when they were able to organize locally in Iraq through the areas that were occupied, and especially in the Sunni areas, by playing on the feeling of grievances of many Arab Sunnis in that area, especially those who were part of the regime, or those who were not but suddenly felt they're being excluded or marginalized. So in 2006, they declared the Islamic State of Iraq in 2006. Obviously, nobody recognized it. They didn't really have a functional state. And by the day, actually, and at that time, they initially pledged allegiance, and about in 2004, when they first organized there, pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda, to the Al-Qaeda group, which was based in Afghanistan or Pakistan, in some of these caves. So what happened is, in 2006, they declared their state, the Islamic State of Iraq, but they became more and more vicious, more and more barbaric, to the point where they started losing the support of people who even they claimed they were supporting. Even when they were saying we're doing this on behalf of the Sunni Arabs in the area, even these people started rejecting Al-Qaeda and rejecting this group. And actually, by 2008, 2009, they almost disappeared. They were more in hiding. They were doing hit-and-run tactics, but no presence, no actual state. That continued to be the case until 2011. In March 2011, the Syrian Revolution for Freedom started, along with the Arab revolutions or the Arab Spring. In 2011, as the regime started losing ground in parts of Syria, some of the people of the Islamic State of Iraq started coming and crossing the border. Syria and Iraq share a large border, and mainly from the Anbar area, from the western part of Iraq, which is the Sunni area, to also the western part of Syria. As Al-Qaeda or groups, or this group, started coming to Syria, it started settling in the larger Sunni populations area, and also keeping in mind there's a lot of grievances against the regime of Assad, of course. So at that time, while many people in Syria disliked what they taught and what they preached, and you can talk to people, they will tell you we hate their guts, but they're good fighters. So people welcomed their ability, that the fact that they came into their areas and repelled the regime. And the regime was engaged in all sorts of atrocities: rape, killing, murder, torture. So at that time, there was a helpless community, and they found these people coming from Iraq, and actually many of them were foreigners joining them. So there were Moroccans, Pakistanis, Uzbeks, Iraqis, Saudis, Yemenis, in the hundreds initially, coming to the aid of their Syrian brethren. Basically, that was their argument. We're here to defend you. They were one of the smallest groups among many of the people fighting there. There were the Syrians, Free Syrian Army, and its various groups. There was the local group of Al-Qaeda called Jabhat al-Nusra. ISIS, and it wasn't called ISIS yet, was the smallest group of all. In 2013, they changed their name into the Islamic State in Iraq and Sham. That's where the ISIS come from. Or the Levant. Sham means the Levant area. The Sham means Syria, Palestine, Jordan, and part of Iraq. So they declared their name, they changed their name, and that's when actually we started hearing the name in 2013. The actual name was Jaysh al-Dawla, basically the army of the Dawla of Islamic State of Iraq and Sham and Syria, Greater Syria. Slowly but surely they started growing in number and growing in size and effectiveness. There are many factors that I will mention very briefly. In 2014, they declared their separation, their split from Al-Qaeda, because there was some fight between them and Jabhat al-Nusra, which was the local Qaeda in Syria, and they were becoming much more brutal than Al-Qaeda could ever be. And imagine that Al-Qaeda was issuing statements condemning acts by ISIS. So just kind of visualize how bad they are. So the Zawahiri, the head of Al-Qaeda, was actually issuing statements condemning. They said, that's way too violent. That's way too brutal. That's not how we do things. So imagine if Al-Qaeda was criticizing them, that tells you how much off they are to begin with from Islam. And that's when they declared independence from Al-Qaeda in 2014. In actually June 2014, they declared the Khilafah. They said, we're no longer the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham. We are now the Islamic State. We are the Islamic State. We are the Khilafah. And every Muslim under our rule or outside should declare bay'ah, allegiance to that state. If you haven't done that, you are sinning according to them. It's a joke. But this is how much they live in their out of reality. I mean, they're completely out of reality. They're living in their own world without understanding of anything that is happening, the actual needs of people, the actual religious background that Sheikh Muzammil just talked about, how people feel, all the brutality you can imagine they were committing. And by the way, when we mention ISIS, it is important to remember, as bad as it is to attack anyone outside of the Muslim world, their main targets had been Muslims. And to be more specific, because I don't want people to think this is, sectarian. Actually, most of their targets, most of their people killed had been Sunnis. Sunnis from the Syrian and the Iraqi area. Basically, any tribe that refuses to give allegiance is considered to be, because they engage in takfir, is an apostate. So any tribe that lives in the region that they control and refuses to give bay'ah, they consider them to be part of Ridda. They basically apostates from Islam. They commit apostasy from Islam. So they are legitimate to be killed. All their men. Actually, one tribe in the area of Deir ez-Zor in Syria, 600 men were slaughtered on video, one by one. All Sunnis and Arabs. So nobody can think this is just a sectarian thing. There's actually a cuckoo people at all levels. 600 people were slaughtered on video. You can get the video. The Shu'aitat tribe. Actually, secret burial areas were found just about 2 weeks ago that included children, 60 children, including people 11, 12, 13-year-old boys from the Shu'aitat family who were massacred by this group. Because that tribe, the head of the tribe, refused to give allegiance to that group. So what are some of the factors behind its growth? And I will go very briefly, inshallah. One is, their mentality is Khawarij. And we'll talk more about that in details. But this is so we can link things to history. First of all is the existence of repression and dictatorships in the region. When you suppress people, when you take people's freedom away from them, it creates a fertile ground for people to be easily recruited into these kind of sick ideologies. Because people feel helpless, they feel hopeless, and when someone comes to them and sells them something that's too good to be true, and it is too good to be true, but it's like, we're going to do this and we're going to liberate our world and we are going to establish this, it is appealing to young people. A lot of their followers are young men, usually 18 to 40, 45 years old. So this is the age of passion, age of a lot of energy. And again, they're jobless. These people are unemployed because of the corruption in that region in the Middle East. A lot of these people don't have a job. There's a lot of political repression. There is a lot of repression against Islamic practices, specifically. In much of that part of the world, there is an attack on the freedom to practice Islam. So a lot of these people who are religious or recently religious feel that these governments are bad, they're not the solution to my problems, whether it's political, religious, or economic. So they look for ways out. And unfortunately, these ways out are the extremes. And they're pushed into the extreme. This is not to justify what they're doing, by the way. I don't want anyone to think this is a justification, but this is an understanding of why they exist so we can deal with the problem from its root, to make sure no one gets attracted to this type of perversion. Also, another factor is the sectarianism in the region. There is obviously sectarianism, and specifically since they appeal to the Sunni side, there is sectarianism with the government of Iraq, which excluded a lot of the Sunnis and was controlled by some of the very sectarian groups, supported by a very sectarian regime in Iran. Also the regime in Syria, the Assad regime, is much more even sectarian and brutal. So it created a lot of grievances with many people and regions, making them susceptible to the message and the appeal of a sick group such as Al-Qaeda and then ISIS. There's also an exploitation, support, funding that happened to ISIS. There was some support coming from various Arab intelligence agencies. Some Arab intelligence agencies which have their own war with the Islamic movement in the region, especially the political one. So in order to counter that, they started supporting the more extreme ones to make sure that people join them and create a counterbalance. Whether it's Saudi intelligence, UAE intelligence, definitely there is some Arab intelligence coming and funding, and this is a fact, that funding that has been received by them in the early age, especially in 2013, in the whole year of 2013, coming into Syria to fund them. There was also some indirect support from the Assad regime, because Assad realized that when they grow, these extremist groups grow, he would look good. The Assad regime would say, to tell the world, listen, it's either me or these terrorists. And basically he would be the lesser of two evils. So he was allowing ISIS to actually invade bases and get weapons from various locations, and suddenly they became much stronger than any other rebel group in Syria. And that's when they started. For the first year actually, in 2013, they never attacked a single time the Assad regime. All their attacks were on the Syrian rebels to take ground from them and take territory. It's only when there were no more rebels in their territory that ISIS started having a confrontation with the Assad regime, and that was only in 2014. Also, another factor in the growth of such groups is the failure of US policies. We cannot deny that. Whether from the beginning, the immoral and illegal invasion of Iraq. Yes, Saddam Hussein was a bad regime, dictatorial, repressive regime, but the answer to that would not have been through an immoral, illegal invasion that actually destroyed every structure of government in Iraq, created sectarianism between Sunnis and Shias, between Arabs and Kurds, and the result is clear. Before 2003, there wasn't a single cell of Al-Qaeda that existed in Iraq. Not a single one. It's only after the invasion that Iraq became the biggest place for the growth and the organization of Al-Qaeda and other groups later on. By the way, one of the pretexts of the invasion of the war was in the attack. The invasion was that the weapons of mass destruction, but also that Iraq was responsible for 9/11, which both were wrong. The reality is this is what we're dealing with. It's U.S. foreign policy, unfortunately, that creates this mess. Also, the support for dictatorships in the Middle East, which creates the suppression we talked about. There's also the inaction in face of a lot of criminal and brutality of the Assad regime. You know, the US continues to say we stand by the Syrian people, but not doing enough to support the moderates, allowing the extremists to grow and become a problem, a worldwide problem now. And the unconditional support that Israel's occupation continues to get and its apartheid regime that creates frustration, grievances in the region, making people susceptible to extremist messages rather than dealing with the injustices in a fair way. So these are some of the issues that inshallah we can elaborate more during the Q&A. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Brother Hussam Ailoush. Again, he's representing CARE, and we appreciate those insights because definitely learning the history and the background kind of gives everybody a general understanding, and then definitely to understand that this terrorist problem is really affecting everybody. It's quite universal. So definitely something all of us should be concerned and try to understand. Next, we'd like to invite Brother Salam al-Mariyati, and please forgive me that I did forget to introduce his title. He's currently the president of the Muslim Public Affairs Council, MPAC, which works effortlessly to, again, create awareness about Muslims in America.
Thank you so much, Lubna.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'll be very short because I think Dr. Siddiqui and Hussam have already done an excellent job in providing you background about this situation. And we're also very eager to engage in discussion. I'm here more actually to listen to what people have to say and then have an exchange of ideas on this issue rather than just giving a lecture. And having said that, we basically have three issues that we should be thinking about as we take the information and the analysis and say, what does it mean for us here? Why is this important? And I get this a lot. Why do we have to talk about this? They have the KKK and they have terrorists in every group. Why is it that we have to talk about this? And I'll give you one simple answer. Our children. Our children are confused. They go on the internet and they see this. And they talk about it at school and they watch it on the news. And if we aren't prepared to talk about it, then our children will be confused. And believe you me, there are young Muslims that are leaving Islam even when they don't announce that they're leaving Islam, because it's just too much baggage for them to carry. And unless we provide them an alternative that is grounded in Islam, then we will suffer more and more young Muslims who are live the dual life. They'll come and they'll pray, but then when they're out there, yeah, my mom and dad, they're Muslims, but all they do is pray. In other words, they're not proud of being Muslim. They will hide their Islam. So our children, that is the most important reason why we have to talk about this issue. And even when we ourselves are struggling with how to talk about it, we should keep talking until we gain clarity on the issue. So let me just provide 3 points, as I said, on this issue. Number one, Islam stands for freedom. When we say La ilaha illallah, there is no God but the one God. That means no human being can force me to believe what he believes. There is no compulsion in religion. La ikraha fid din. And when Muslim countries have religious police and they have takfir and they have the ideology of compulsion, then why are we surprised that there are groups like ISIS that take it to the extreme of violence now? So there's a root problem in this ideology of a compulsion, and we as American Muslims have the opportunity to declare freely and openly and without any apology, this is why we are Muslim, because Islam stands for freedom. And that freedom is for men and women. That freedom is for Muslim and non-Muslim. That freedom is for young and old. It is freedom that we bring to our society. Number two, Islam stands for protecting life. As Dr. Siddiqui will tell us, the first goal of Sharia is what? To secure and develop the right to life. When the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came to Medina, the first order of business was that Medina became a sanctuary, so anyone that came into Medina was protected by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the Muslims. And when they opened up Mecca, they went and they said everyone is free. There was no retribution. So our job is to protect life. And number three, Islam brought human dignity to the world. وَلَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when we say he's a mercy to humanity, to the worlds, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, that means that he brought respect to every human being, whether they believe or don't believe. And he would forgive people. He would let people come in, and there was a story, a famous story of about a man who came into the mosque and started urinating in the mosque. And the companions wanted to beat him, they wanted to push him out. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ either said, just let him finish, or let him be. And then afterwards, he told people, okay, go clean it up, and then we will deal with people. Dr. Hassan Hattout, one of the great Hattouts, the other one passed away last week, he said, the mosque should be like a hospital. We are here to treat people. We are here to cure people. Sometimes we think when somebody comes in the mosque, they have to be what we think is a good Muslim. And if they don't fit that model, well, yeah, they're kind of weird. We already marginalize people when they walk in the mosque. But human dignity means that everyone deserves that respect and that right to be a human being, to be free, to be protected, and to be respected. That's the alternative that we have to give. And then we can stop worrying about why everybody keeps asking us about this issue when we are more vocal and stronger. Let's face it, we don't have a strong communication strategy for America yet. We are working on it. As many press releases you get from MPAC and CARE and ISNA and Shura, all your email inboxes I'm sure is full now by all of our press releases, it doesn't make a dent. What it requires is engaging the larger society on these issues and being a part of civil society as leaders of America. And that is the opportunity that we must offer young Muslims. These young Muslims must be leaders in America, not just leaders in our community, not just doctors or engineers, but public servants, media strategists, people who engage in philanthropy. That is when we will begin to change. Even Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote this article in Time magazine. He said, he hopes for a day when these terrorists praising Muhammad or Allah's name as they debase their actual teachings are instantly recognized as thugs disguising themselves as Muslims. And then he ends by saying, I look forward to the day when an act of terrorism by self-proclaimed Muslims will be universally dismissed as nothing more than a criminal attack of a thuggish political organization wearing an ill-fitting Muslim mask. To get to that point, we will need to teach our communities what the real beliefs of Islam are. In the meantime, keep my name, Kareem's name, not mine, on speed dial, if anybody has his number, so we can get through this together. Brothers and sisters, the point is, we cannot do this alone. We have to do this with other Americans. And the more we educate our children and other Americans on this issue, the more effective we will be on this issue, so that our children don't have to apologize for being Muslims. They will be proud of being Muslims in America. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Brother Salam, for those inspiring and encouraging words. I did have the honor of working with Brother Salam for a few years at MPAC, and we're really technically, but really, wallahi, this panel right here is a panel of my mentors, so I'm truly grateful. And we're also grateful, as Brother Salam pointed out, that not only do we have to be engaged within our own communities and understanding what are the basics of our religion so that we do not get swayed and start believing incorrect messages and to have our youth get rallied into such organizations, but also to engage with our fellow Americans, because that's who we are, and that's who we want to interact with in a peaceful and loving manner. So we'd like to next invite Sheikh Muslima Purmo, and she will share with us some ideas of how we can protect our community and from our families from such extremist messaging.
Assalamu alaikum. It's an honor to be with all of you today. SubhanAllah, the topic of how do we actually deal with our own young people and make sure that they aren't swayed by the messages that they see in the media sometimes, the messages of extremism that they're getting from different groups. Initially, when you hear that question, if you're involved in the masjid, you say, well, we don't have extreme youth. Not in our masjid. We don't have extreme, violent, youth with these tendencies. So, how do we even address this question? And the other thing that tends to happen, unfortunately, is when people talk about ISIS or they talk about what happened in Paris, there's a lot of conspiracy theory type language that comes out. This is actually has nothing to do with us. Someone else is behind this. It's not even Muslims to begin with, and what have you. So I want to just put both of these, arguments on the side and say, let's just say, for the sake of argument, you're right. Let's just say there's a big fat conspiracy, and these extremists are not Muslim at all, and they're, what do people like to usually blame? The Israeli Mossad is training them, right, in tents under the ground or something. That's the argument. Let's just say that's true. Then why do Muslim scholars who protest this in their social media publicly, why are they getting death threats from Muslims? There's a message I got. I had to ban this person from my Facebook, and it was really disturbing. It was a Muslim name that did so, and it's a quote of Ibn Taymiyyah. And I don't know if it's a real quote. It's they made it into like they didn't even just put the quote by itself. There's a picture. They something like a poster, and it says. This was in response to when I put condemned what happened in Paris. The execution of the one who insults the Prophet remains the right of Allah, His Messenger, and the believers, and the one who deserves to be executed cannot be left off, so the punishment must be carried out. And then they have the name Ibn Taymiyyah. So this is a poster that's floating around somewhere on the internet, and the person who left this comment was under the page Islamic Wisdoms. I don't remember the exact name. Regardless, Sheikh Omar Suleiman, Sheikh Yasir Qadi, Imam Suhaib Webb, they can all tell you about death threats. They can all tell you about comments on their page. They can tell you about a bunch of different Muslim names on social media that are arguing with them and fighting with them. These trolls that are supporting hate. So let's just say it was a conspiracy. Let's just say Muslims didn't do any of this. Why are these people supporting it? Why are these voices on social media, putting out posters and saying what they're saying? That means that there is a contingency. Even if we don't see them physically in our mosques, there are people who call themselves Muslims who are being fooled by these messages. So then what is our response as a community, and how do we make sure our young people don't get caught up with such people? You look at what are the core causes. There's different articles online about what are the core causes that push a person into a hateful or violent mentality. And then you have to look at what are things that you can do that will alleviate this as a masjid or as a Muslim community. One of the biggest things is that there is despair. They have an attitude of despair with regards to what's going on politically. So in masajid, one of the things that we try to do in ICOI, is to talk about the different political catastrophes that are going on around the world and basing that discussion in our own aqidah, in our own spiritual tradition. So a person who feels like they have no control, telling them, what does qadr actually mean? What do the end of days actually mean? What is the Islamic response? How much control do you have? And what they feel usually when we talk about despair is that they feel overwhelmed and they feel powerless. So where does power actually come from in Islam, and how is power supposed to be used? And when something is beyond, your immediate choice, how are you supposed to engage that subject? This is something that needs a spiritual discussion, an aqidah discussion first. As a Muslim, what do I believe? How do I make sense of everything that's going on within my worldview on a spiritual level? So aqidah or our belief system is something that can provide healing. It can also provide guidance, and it shows people that there is hope. That it's not an issue of despair. I can look at the situation in Syria and say, all of this is happening, but I still have hope in God for a better day tomorrow based on my spiritual tradition. And I will engage, that issue in a way that God is pleased with. So that's something that requires a level of training. The second thing that sometimes leads to this is religious ignorance. So a person can get fooled by a statement like this that they see on a poster because they are actually very ignorant of their own faith. So in masajid, and not just in masajid, but especially online, because as Imam Suhaib said for the bombers in Boston, that they were not radicalized in the masjid, they were radicalized online. So now we have to take education and make it very accessible in the online world. And dealing with the subject of jihad and what are the ethics of war in Islam, what are the ethics of fighting, what does it mean to have a peaceful contract? Like, these are issues that we need to have serious education on, so that ignorance is dispelled. The other, thing that is a major part of this is personality worship. So a person would worship a particular personality. They start to see them in a certain way. This Zarqawi figure becomes, he's perhaps very, charismatic or whatnot. So young people, people in general, need to be taught not to worship personalities. That it's, there's a balance in this, in that when you hear anything from a religious leader, from anyone, we have to train our communities to be critical thinkers, so they can they have some guidelines by which they filter information through. But also that if someone is proclaiming something and they don't have scholarly or religious authority to do so, we can't give them that right. So there was someone who had proclaimed that a particular jihad, they had declared that a particular jihad was going on between Muslims in America. That person has no scholarly authority. They have no ability to proclaim anything. And so they need to, this is something that people need to realize, is that scholarship is important. There's a reason why someone who has studied Islam for 30 years is allowed to make a certain statement. Someone who doesn't have that background is not allowed to make that statement. And even if someone has studied Islam and they do have the requisite background, that scholar is still supposed to not be followed blindly. They are still subject to critical thinking and the engagement of the Muslim community. And this is important that you have that balance, because you did have, in the Muslim world, you had scholars who had the requisite educational background support state-sponsored terrorism, right? So you did see certain people who had the background. And you also have people like Zarqawi, like, unfortunately, Anwar Awlaqi, who said things that they don't have the scholarly background to say it. They don't have the authority to say it. So I think we need to be very careful who we label sheikh in our community. It doesn't matter if they're eloquent or not eloquent, if they have a long beard, if they wear a robe. It was really interesting to see the way that we give authority as a community to people. I was in the UK, and there was a brother who had memorized the entire Quran, and he had come in and he was wearing a robe and he had a long beard, and he had a little bit of an accent with his British accent, an Eastern accent, and everyone just started calling him sheikh. He has no background in scholarship for him to have this authority with them. He's not a sheikh. And you had someone else who was in a suit, clean-shaven, or not clean-shaven, small, Dr. Salam al-Mariyati beard, or smaller beard. And this person actually had a 4-year degree in Sharia. And they also had a counseling background. They were a licensed therapist, all of this. But because they spoke perfect British English, and because they showed up in a suit, no one was calling them sheikh. So we're giving authority to people just based on, an exterior look. And that's something, again, that within our masajid, within our institutions, we have to teach people to respect. You don't go to a doctor because he called himself doctor. He has to have that educational background. And the same applies to those who we call our scholars. And even if they, again, did have that scholarly background, training our community to be critical in the way that they evaluate what he says. Another issue that leads to extremism and violence is isolation. And this is true not just for when you think about terrorist acts, but kids who get caught up in gangs or get caught up in other violent acts and young people who get caught up with the wrong sort of actions in America. One of the biggest things is they feel isolated, or they're experiencing some level of isolation and powerlessness in their own life. So as was mentioned by Dr. Salam, the masjid has to be a sanctuary. And I don't know how many people have seen the documentary Unmosqued. And it's a really sad, but it's a documentary where you're like, this entire thing is like singing, stringing the the strings of my heart, because it's explaining a lot of the dissonance that Muslims feel in the masjid. So imagine if people who are practicing feel this level of dissonance. Imagine the young person who comes in to the masjid. Is the masjid going to embrace them? I know imams who feel very unmosqued, like religious leaders who feel unmosqued. Like that means that this is a problem in terms of the culture of our masjid. And if you don't want people to become isolated, then we have to change that culture, consciously and actively. And as Dr. Salam mentioned, the masjid is not just a place that only certain types of people who fit a certain type of criteria comes to. Everyone should feel welcome in the masjid. Everyone should feel like it's a place to heal. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that the wolf attacks the lone sheep. So it's really easy to get radicalized when you're isolated, but it's very hard to do so when you feel love, when you feel genuine love and brotherhood and sisterhood. And that's the environment you want to create in the masjid. One of the things I remember noticing myself when I was in college in MSA was there was a high ethic of, you know, brotherhood and sisterhood in the MSA. There's a lot of brothers' social activities and brothers' gatherings and outings, and actually the brothers would spend the night in each other's apartments a lot because they would like stay up late and study together, to the extent that it was called the refugee camp, because you have 12 brothers in a 2-bedroom apartment just, you know, studying together. But one thing that was amazing about that is that brotherhood itself, like true brotherhood itself, changed these people's lives. So these were, a lot of these young men were people whose families went to the masjid, but they didn't really care about Islam. They were the kinds of people who wouldn't talk about Islam. They weren't very proud of their faith. But when they came into a space like MSA, they had a chance to be loved and to be express themselves even politically in a healthy way. So subhanAllah, this is really important again in terms of the way that we think about our masjid as fighting the tendency towards isolation. The masjid should not be a place that causes people to flee. The other aspect is that when people feel powerless, the models of healthy engagement have to be there for them. So I've heard some people say actually that, you know, Muslims right now shouldn't be involved in anything political. They should just focus in like spiritual matters and their education. It's the end of the world, you know, it's the end of times. And subhanAllah, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said that if you knew that the day of judgment was tomorrow, if you knew that the end of times, basically for your times, is coming, and you had a seed, you know, a tree that you wanted to plant, still go and plant that seed. So the Muslim never has this, even if you think, you know, subhanAllah, this is, you know, again, through our faith tradition, even if you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, you live your life to the fullest, and you contribute as much as possible to your last breath. And subhanAllah, this is something that organizations like MPAC and CARE need to be supported in our community. There is something that CARE does called the Muslim Game Changers Network, and it shows young people, it shows how to get them engaged politically in a healthy way. I know MPAC also does a leadership summit with young people, showing them how to engage American politics. I don't think it's the time to flee political participation. It's actually the time to run towards it, but in a very healthy manner, and using the organizations that exist that are doing an amazing job. There's 2 other points. One of them is that sometimes the people who are falling into this type of radicalization, I would say most of the time, if they're falling into it, there is an issue of mental illness. I would love to see masajid all across America hire licensed therapists, male and female licensed therapists. The imam is not trained to do the counseling that he does, and I can tell you it takes a toll on him because he's not trained to know how to even alleviate the pressures of that. But licensed therapists are trained for that, and we have Muslim licensed therapists, and we need to make sure that our masajid can, you know, have a fund where they can actually pay for this in-house. A lot of times my husband, when he was the imam at ICOI, people would come to him and they just wanted to sort of vent to a religious figure. So he would listen to everything, and then he would give them the phone number or access to a Muslim therapist, and people usually were too lazy to take the second step. And so that's why people do go to the masjid still. For some reason, they'd rather talk to an imam than it's still taboo, unfortunately, in our community. We need to make it untaboo. I think we should bring therapists into our masajid, and make it accessible to everyone. The last point is something that Dr. Salam also mentioned, which is that the quote from, I think it was, you said, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. This is something, subhanAllah, my husband and I were talking about this, and we said, how come is it that whenever a catastrophe happens, and right now it's happening unfortunately like every 2 weeks, but whenever a catastrophe happens, our community all of a sudden remembers that they have neighbors that they should go and visit, and that they should be involved in civic duty, in different, at a different level, in non-political things, in social things, in cultural things. And I think it's only when we stop, I believe there is a spiritual crisis at some level, even within the Muslim community that is practicing, that's here today, all of us here in the masjid, in that we like to enjoy the gifts of America, but sometimes we're really lazy when it comes to giving back. And for your neighbor or for our neighbors to see us as an asset to this country, or to such events would happen and they would just write it off without a second thought. They need to engage with us. They need to have conversations with us. So I believe grassroots campaigns, things like having, my husband mentioned this idea, he thought it would be nice to do with youth, is like making a bunch of t-shirts that say, I'm Muslim, I'm not a terrorist, let's talk. And just bringing them to like a mall or a public space with tables and some information, and letting them just get to know other Americans, because as studies show, it takes the bad impression of Islam that people would have is decreased a lot just when they know one Muslim. If they don't know us, that's our fault. That really is our fault. If non-Muslims don't know us, if our neighbors don't know us, if our communities don't know us, that's our fault. And we have to think, even as a masjid or as Muslim institutions, if all of these institutions were gone tomorrow, would anyone from the community complain? From the non-Muslim community, would anyone say that, we missed that institution? That institution was valuable to our society. And thinking about whatever masjid it is that you attend or institution that you attend, how does it engage everyone else? And a final thought is that a lot of times we're talking about political engagement and power. But subhanAllah, the example that you see in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is that the focus, even though they achieved power, the focus was always service. And where are we when it comes to service? And where are we in encouraging our youth to be service-oriented when it comes to the broader society? So I know my time is up. I have a lot to say about the online ideological battle, but we don't have time for it, so we'll end with this, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Muslima. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and truly, I think that's such an important takeaway. That we really need to be critical thinkers, and we need to teach our children to be critical thinkers, just as they wouldn't just as we teach them not to, really fall into any scam that they see on the internet. It's the same thing with people posing as knowledgeable people, whether it be in politics or in religion, and really falling into some of those traps. I welcome those of you who have questions. We really want to engage a discussion and really an interactive question and answer session. So we do have volunteers that are walking around and giving note cards and pens. So could we have our volunteers also walk around and pick up some of these questions? We're going to be taking them as they come in. And we do suggest that you do write them down, because it helps us to be a little bit more efficient. So we shall begin that question and answer. We have our first one, and this question is for Salama Mariyati. The question is, what role is the U.S. government playing or should play in supporting American Muslims to counter the ISIS narrative? And would you like to stand, or it's kind of,
yeah.
Yes.
That's a very radioactive question. It's a tough one. Well, let's start with the obvious. What's on everybody's minds when it comes to the U.S. government and mosques? And that's surveillance, sting operations. And Nihad Awad, the national executive, Hussam's boss, and I were involved in a documentary. And unfortunately, I didn't think it got well played enough. It's called The Newburgh Sting, where they went into a poor African American community and lured these guys who were petty criminals. They were involved in some criminal activity, but they offered them like $250,000, and one guy needed to buy an organ for his brother for a transplant so he can live, so he thought he could be involved. None of them wanted to be involved in hurting anybody, but because they were lured into that, they were entrapped. They got convicted for terrorism. And I don't even think, some of them were not even Muslim, but they met Muslims, sometime in their life or in their interactions. But that is a negative interaction of the government. If we want to push surveillance out of the mosque, we have to create our own programs. You can't just talk about it and say this is bad. You can't just say law enforcement is bad and the media is bad and the Jews and Christians are bad and the foreign policy is bad, everything is bad. Then people will look at us like, well, who are you? Like, are you a know-it-all, or are you in this disillusion that you're the only one who is right and everybody is wrong? When you think that you're the only one who's right and everybody's wrong, there's something wrong. And it's usually not them, it's with us. We have to think a little more critically. So what we have, and I'm not making this a commercial, we have what's called the Safe Spaces Initiative. And it needs to be discussed. What we're saying is create the safe space to preserve the sanctuary at the mosque so it is free of surveillance and free of anyone that is trying to lure our kids in the mosque or online into this violent extremist ideology. And we have crisis intervention teams. And the crisis intervention teams, as Muslima was referring to, one of them is a mental health counselor. So that if a person is troubled, like Tamerlan Tsarnaev in Boston, what did he do? He started shouting at the imam, saying, you know, you shouldn't be talking about Martin Luther King in a mosque. He's not a Muslim. And he did it twice, I think. So we kicked him out. And it's understandable. We don't want trouble. But then he did what he did, and it still came back to us. So, number one, if we find somebody troubled, I think it is out of our compassion as Muslims, our Islamic obligation, to first try to help that person, to rehabilitate that person. If we don't rehabilitate, they will incarcerate. And that is what a crisis intervention team is supposed to do. Then if we find, yeah, you know what, this guy is involved in some bad stuff. And when I mean bad stuff, I don't mean good things. I mean really nasty things. It's not, this is not within our purview. It's not something that we're professionals at. We need to say, somebody from law enforcement, okay, you need to investigate this situation because we're not criminal investigators. Now, this is very tricky, of course, because when does the mosque say we will then allow law enforcement to look into this, and when do we, keep them at bay? It is all dependent on the relationships that we build, the trust that we build in the community, and the judgment that we offer our leaders to say this is how the situation should be handled. But it requires careful planning and implementation and intervention and looking at these situations very, very delicately, very, very delicately. And that is when we will have a healthy partnership with the U.S. government. We want Muslims to be treated as partners, not as suspects. That's the goal. That should be the relationship between us and the U.S. government. And the fact is, they don't know how to speak about ISIS. They're not going to go and say, this is what Islam stands for. And when they do, honestly, I think they're making a big mistake. It is we Muslim leaders, the community leaders, that are here to offer the counter to that violent extremist narrative. We're the ones that have that authenticity and legitimacy, especially with our own community members and with our youth. And so it is again our responsibility as Muslims to stand up and speak and then create that positive partnership relationship with law enforcement and the U.S. government.
Thank you, Brother Salam. Would anybody else on the panel like to answer that question? Yes. Hopefully we should have two working. Does that work?
What is it?
Okay.
Yeah, that works, inshallah. I mean, there's a challenge when we trust law enforcement agency with the affairs of our mosques in terms of religious ideology, because no other religion does that. No other religious community does that. And I'm not specifically commenting on Salam's comments, but on the issue of countering violent extremism. There's a threat there's a danger when we accept this terminology within our own community, because no other community has to deal with that. You don't hear about countering violent extremism to deal with the thousands of Jewish American kids who joined the Israeli army killing people of Gaza. When was the last time the DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, or the FBI approached the Jewish community to ask them to deal with this trend? Actually, there are many more Jewish Americans who have joined the Israeli army than there are Muslim Americans who have joined ISIS. So let's talk about the Jewish American kids who joined the Jewish state before we talk about, or as we talk about the Muslim Americans who joined the Islamic State. Neither one represents Judaism or Islam. How many countering violent extremism programs exist in churches to deal with a lot of these Christian white supremacist groups that exist by the thousands with membership in the hundreds of thousands in America. They don't. The problem is when we accept that we are going to be singled out as some kind of a unique community, we reinforce a negative perception that exists about our community. The reality is, using government numbers now, I'm not using my numbers, there's about a dozen, maybe 20 American Muslims who have joined ISIS. As bad as it is, for me, even one joining is stupid enough and bad enough. But it does not require a national program, especially not the government spending millions of dollars on scrutinizing the American Muslim community. What we need to do is obviously address the problem of ISIS, because ISIS is a problem. ISIS is not an imagination of our mind. ISIS is not a conspiracy, as Sheikh Muslima said. It is not. It might be exploited by these groups. They exist. You go to Syria, you see them. You go to Iraq, they exist. But we have the tools to address ISIS. We have our scholars, may Allah bless them and give them long life, like Sheikh Muzammil and others, with the knowledge around the country. Sheikh Suhaib, Sheikh Suhail, Sheikh Jamal, Sheikh Muslima. MashaAllah, we, just in our area, Sheikh Muhammad Faqih, Sheikh Yasir, in our area, we have enough to counter their sick ideology. We have enough programs between MPAC and CARE and the Masjid and the MSAs and MAS to keep our youth engaged. Now, when we have people who have mental illnesses, mental health problems, they need to be addressed. We should have, and I agree, our masajid, it was mentioned by Salam, it was mentioned by Sheikh Muslima, our masajid are in need to look into this issue without dealing with it as a taboo. The problem is, we do have a problem within the Muslim community that we are ashamed to address mental sicknesses, mental illnesses. We think this is something shameful in a community. It's real, it exists. Like you get a cold, some people get a cold, somebody has a depression, somebody has anxiety. It's normal things, it happens in everybody, and we have to address it. When we notice someone drifting away, it is our job to find a way to protect them. And again, if somebody is engaged in anything illegal, anything that you know is illegal, then obviously we have to stop them from doing it, or if it causes harm, to report them. There's no debate about that. My issue is not about that. Obviously, my issue is to be careful, especially the biggest buzzword now in government is CVE, which is countering violent extremism. And this is specifically a program for Muslims. This is not about any other community. And we have to be careful not to allow those few in our government who wish to exploit the system to get more funding for their agencies and their departments, to use our community as guinea pigs, our youth as targets for their programs, because it will create mistrust in our masajid. If our youth don't feel comfortable enough to talk about their views, if our imams are afraid to criticize US foreign policy because they're afraid someone is going to report them as an ISIS sympathizer, we lose our freedom, we lose the activism of our religion and its ability to bring goodness to society at large. Can you repeat the second part?
Yes.
The first part I got it.
And how do you think that Muslims in general should respond to Islamophobic comments, whether it's on social media or in person?
Well, I think keeping me calm, in addition to making dua, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri, I had a good dose of NyQuil before going in, because I was sick and I was coughing. I needed something to suppress the cough. I guess it suppressed my emotions. So my blood was boiling. I wanted to say a lot of things, but I was like, no, suppress it. Because it's no use to engage in the same level of anger it's important to make our point clear, and hopefully those who are fair-minded will hear the points and notice that Bill O'Reilly was trying to silence his guest. It was myself and Brother Harith Taran from MPAC's national office. And I think both of us were, alhamdulillah, able to make our points clear to those who are fair-minded. In terms of how to deal with Islamophobia, is differentiate between two sources of Islamophobia. There's the ill-intended industry. There's an industry, deliberate industry, to defame Islam and Muslims. It's an industry with $30 to $40 million budget every year, about 34 organizations. They do publish books. They have speakers who go around on TV. That's intentional. Their intention is to actually defame Islam and create fear of Islam. Whenever there's a masjid being built, check Fear Inc. It's a report that was produced, Fear Incorporated, Fear Inc. Produced, and there was also a CARE report called Legislating Fear. You can download them. They're both available for free, and it details that industry, who is behind it, why they're doing it, what's their budget, and so on, what's their frames, what's the messages that they bring. What is important to differentiate between that group, because these people need to be exposed, they need to be challenged, they need to be defeated, they need to be countered in every level and at every level. The other Islamophobia is coming from people who are doing it out of ignorance. And that is people who are as much victimized of it as we are. The victims of Islamophobia are two. The targets of Islamophobia, us, Muslims, to marginalize us, to make us look like danger, threat to people. But the other target of it is, the bigger target is the American public. Their goal is to create separation, division between us and fellow Americans. These people are not our enemies. These people are not adversaries. These people are your neighbor, your co-worker, your friend, maybe your relative too. These people need to be talked to. You need to show them Islam in your lifestyle, in your attitude, in your character. Talk to them. Be forgiving. Just because they call you a terrorist, just because they ask you. Wallah, you have no idea how many times I get asked, are you a supporter or sympathizer of ISIS? Do you support ISIS? Oh, do you support what happened in Paris? Don't get upset, because they're asking genuine questions in their mind. They want to know. They want to feel comfortable. Is this masjid an ISIS masjid? Believe me, I get asked these questions when I say, I'm giving a khutbah there. Is this an ISIS masjid or not? I said, there's no ISIS masjid. But the problem is, people are fooled, and we need to spend the time and invest. And I think once we know who we're dealing with, and most people are from the second category, it takes patience, it takes rahmah, it takes, the example of the Prophet ﷺ, how he was treated. Remember his story in Ta'if, right? People threw rocks at him, called him crazy. They sent the kids to throw stones at him, kicked him out of the city. What did he do? He was sitting crying for them. When Allah sent the angel for him to tell him, I'm here at your orders now. You give me the order, I close the two mountains on them. The Prophet said, no, that's not what I was sent for. Maybe Allah will send people among them who will worship Allah and recognize Allah. He made dua for them. So we have to follow that example. The example of when he entered Mecca, after being forced out of Mecca, being tortured by the people of Mecca. Some of his best friends were killed by the people of Mecca. And when he entered back to his town after victoriously, what did he say? You're all forgiven. You are all free. He could have punished, and it would have been just to punish, by the way. By international law, he would have been justified in punishing some of those who committed crimes and torture and murder. But he said, you're all forgiven. You did it out of ignorance. And he gained the hearts and the minds of people. We want to operate, inshallah, that way.
One thing is, I found that there are some people, they would like to understand, so of course we have to go out of our way to make them understand who we are, what our message is, what Islam stands for. But there are some people who want to make you angry, and they want to excite you, and they want to get something, so that you, in reaction, you say something. At that time, keep quiet. Don't answer them. إِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. Allah said that. When the ignorant address you, peace be unto you. Because you cannot. Because they don't want to understand. For them, the objective is not to understand, for them is not to work it out. let us understand, you understand us. No, they're not. They want to make you angry. So we should not become angry. We should keep our calm and understand and work with patience. Patience is very important.
The soft clap, it kind of went along with the wonderful, soft, and patient tone of Dr. Muzammil, mashallah. And really, that truly is wallahi, mashallah, very wise advice. When we find that blood is boiling and you see truly that on the opposite end, it's not really a matter of ignorance, it's a matter of really pushing the limits. That's hard to do, but that's fantastic advice, and we can do it by the will of Allah. Next, for both Dr. Muzammil Siddiqui and for Sheikh Muslima, this question, how, and of course everyone else can add on as well, how can we unite as an ummah, as a Muslim community worldwide, when we have challenges organizing even sometimes small activities at the local level? How do you, maybe Dr. Muzammil, if you'd like to answer first, or
we have to learn how to live with our differences. We do have differences. We have differences of our different ethnicities, try to understand each other, differences of culture, differences of food, differences of background, all of these things. We also have differences of schools of thought. We cannot say, no, everybody should give up. People have background, work it out. There are a lot of things in common. Beautiful thing is, was being said by someone, نتعاون فيما اتفقنا ويعذر بعضنا بعضا فيما اختلفنا. We cooperate with each other in the things that we agree on. And we forgive and find an excuse in the things we disagree on. But one thing we have to avoid is not calling names. Because I differ with something, kafir. Immediately become kafir. This is the takfiri mentality, it has to be avoided. Try to see how we can work it out, Just that. Maybe you disagree with something, but okay, we have a lot of things we agree. So let's work on those things that we agree, and you will not find anybody with whom you agree 100%. So if 51% agreement, alhamdulillah, you can make more.
MashaAllah, Jazakumullah khairan.
Just one thing I would add, subhanAllah, because it's really hard to add to anything Dr. Muzammil says, is we talk about tolerance for difference of opinions, toleration within the Muslim community. This person has this particular understanding of Islam, another person is more conservative or more liberal, or they follow this madhab or that madhab, or which school of thought or which university in the Muslim world do the scholars they listen to, whatever it is. I think that we need to actually move past the conversation of toleration and into the conversation of appreciation. Because toleration is kind of like, I can tolerate a spider that walks past me and not crush it, right? But that doesn't do anything for me or the spider. I would hope that we as Muslims are much closer to each other than a spider would be. So appreciation is really to love in each other those things that we do right, or that we agree with, or that we really appreciate. So that's something that has to come from the heart, and that's very different than a competitive spirit, which is to feel bad when another organization or institution or whatever ideology that you disagree with does something good. If you feel bad when that happens, then that's a kind of hate. That's a kind of internal hate that we have to, purify. So appreciation is to look at each other and truly love in one another whatever is good, and to be happy when we see each other succeed, to pray for that Allah increases their success, to work with one another in the areas of agreement, to forgive each other in the areas of disagreement, to have the best suspicion of each other, I think is a really important one. If I know someone personally well and they belong to a particular Muslim organization, I know they're not a corrupt person. Yeah, I know they're not they're about corruption. They do something through the organization that I disagree with, I will not boycott their institution. I personally don't believe in that, because that assumes of them something that is much worse than, let's say, that the specific decision they made. I can maybe not be there for the particular thing I disagree with, but I will still engage them in other areas. And subhanAllah, as was mentioned, there's so many people that we would agree with on different things and disagree with on other things. And if we were to just boycott each other, officially or unofficially, what does that do for our own community? If we want to preach a message of love, then we have to practice it first with ourselves.
So I hate to follow two very loving people and give you the brutal realities of what's happening in the streets. The fact is, we still, as a community, do not know how to manage differences of opinion. And exactly what Dr. Siddiqui said, that this idea, okay, well, they may not say kafir anymore. They used to say you're a kafir, which just meant they disagreed with you. Now they may say, oh, he's a sellout, or he's on the lap of this or that, or they're maybe just getting paid, by the government. These are satanic whispers. And this is a cop-out for dealing with differences of opinion. Some people want to engage, some people want to protest. Okay, so let's allow for both. Some people think we should have dialogue with people in the pro-Israel community. Some people think, no, we should boycott the pro-Israel community. You're going to have strong difference of opinion on these issues that could be very emotional. But the Prophet ﷺ taught us one thing, which is what? He came to teach us manners. And the manner is that when we disagree, we sit down and talk and come up with a strategy. Here's the common ground. If we only agree on 10%, what is that 10%? And then just say we disagree on the other. Or if we can manage the disagreements to say we disagree, but we know we're trying to achieve the same goal. At least strive for that. Even if you don't like what the other group or is doing. Otherwise, as Sheikh al-Muslim has said, you're going to have more and more protests and boycotts of Muslims against Muslims. And this is, you go from differences of opinion to divisiveness, and it becomes a worse problem. So the etiquette of discourse is so important. Just one case, there were some students who did not like what MPAC was doing on a certain issue, so they wrote a petition, and we invited them to come to the office so we can talk about it. The response was silence. They did not want to come and even sit with us to talk about this issue. So to me, that's a red flag. Either they're very confused or somebody is somehow, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but someone is definitely conspiring to put a bug in their ear that MPAC is, the devil incarnate, whatever. And really, honestly, it doesn't bother us. We'll continue doing what we're doing because it's out of our conviction. We're doing it for Islam in America, for the future. And as long as people are in this discussion, we have serious disagreements, but we're working for Islam, that's fine. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't make us the same, even within the Muslim community. We are not the same. But when they don't even have the confidence, or they are suspicious so much that they cannot, like when you say assalamu alaikum, when somebody says assalamu alaikum, you're supposed to at least say alaikum assalam. At least say no thank you, we're very busy, or no, we don't believe that a meeting is, but complete silence. I'm very worried that we are losing the akhlaq, the mannerism of how to engage one another, especially on managing differences of opinion. And Dr. Maher had one of his most famous lines at a shura dinner is, the shura's job is to figure out how to manage differences of opinion, not to get everybody to agree. I think that's more important than to get everybody to agree.
Just if I can add. I just wanted to add a story about what you just mentioned in terms of the petition. I saw the petition, and there were students who actually came and asked me about it, and I told them that there's the reason why I didn't sign the petition, even though I was similarly concerned with the particular speaker, was because in the wording of it, the very last few lines of it were insulting. And I'm like, it's a different, if the petition did not have an insult and it just said, this is why we differ, then I could sign it. But because it's insulting, and I don't believe that that's the etiquette of a Muslim towards another Muslim, they shouldn't do it. At the dinner, the MPAC dinner, the speaker that was there, my husband and I actually, we just waited outside until he left, and then we came in and joined the dinner. And that was our way of showing that we appreciate what MPAC does. We have a change or a difference in opinion with a particular personality, but that doesn't preclude us from engaging with such an amazing organization. So.
Yes, alhamdulillah. Maybe if you check your spam folder, I hope there's an email there. Maybe they responded. No, I'm being funny.
Give them the benefit of the doubt. They did respond. I just don't know how to use my email. Okay.
I'm teasing. I love the message, really, of what we're talking about. Some of you may think, okay, we're getting off topic here, but clearly we're not, because we're talking about the crisis of ISIS is talking about divisiveness, sending out the wrong message, promoting extremism. How can we counteract that if within the own Muslim community, if we have issues amongst fellow organizations that are working towards the same end goal? And if I may really take an example of food, for example, just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us so many different flavors, so many different spices to use to do the same thing for beef, for example, or chicken. Can you say there's only one way to make chicken? There isn't, or beef. And it's kind of a silly analogy, but really, I'm sorry?
I'm getting hungry.
Okay, we were watching Cutthroat Kitchen, sorry, right before we came. Family show for us now. So, but my point is, not only is there different flavors in terms of approaching the same work that all of you are doing, but also there's different flavors of what gets Muslims excited, and some people want to be more politically activated. Some people want to be more active within the community and working with youth. There are so many different avenues and venues for working towards that end goal of peace and understanding among Muslims and amongst all of humanity, that we should not condemn one another for having different methods. And you never know which method will attract what individual to do something and to actually be proactive. So we definitely are happy to see that we have a healthy engagement here. So now we have a question for Brother Salam. We are constantly in an apology mode and held hostage by media and expectations of our response. When and how do we as Americans get out of this cycle? How can we get out of this cycle?
Yeah, this is the question. I mean, how to get out of it. Number one, I just want to make a distinction between apologizing and taking leadership position. None of us, when we condemn terrorism, we're not apologizing. We're not responsible, right? So I disagree with this notion that we're, being apologetic when we talk about this issue. I think we're taking leadership on this issue to take a clear stand, so that, again, our children and our fellow Americans at least know that we are taking that stand. Because when you don't take a stand, you create a vacuum and you let others define you. The biggest problem of Islamophobia is what? The Steve Emersons and the Daniel Pipes and the Bill O'Reillys and the Megyn Kellys and everyone in Fox News. I want to say some dirty word in Arabic, but I won't. Is trying to define who we are. So to reach the goal of when we get out of it is when we define ourselves. So we have to envision, what does that mean when we are able to define ourselves? We have to have influence in the media. We have to have some influence in the government. We have to have a narrative. And we have to have people we need resources in our community that does that. Right now, the resources, alhamdulillah, we have beautiful mosques. I love this mosque, Dr. Siddiqui. And we build more and more mosques, but where are the programs that are sending this message out to the larger society? How much money are we putting into that, right? And there is a category of zakat of what? Softening the hearts of people. That is Islam is telling us, use zakat to soften the hearts of people. So if we go with that conviction, that purpose, and do a good public relations, community relations, public information campaign, we can then see, I think, some progress that we begin to define our own narrative. So, bottom line, we are not apologizing, but we're taking leadership on an issue. So we define our own narrative. We want Islam and Muslims to be a part of the solution on this issue, even though we have nothing to do with what caused that problem. But the fact that Islam is brought into this issue, that's our responsibility, and that's what requires leadership.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that clarification. That's very important. Does anybody else have anything to add on that? Guess that was, alhamdulillah, well said. Very good. Okay, next question is by Brother Aqil, if he could just kind of wave. He posted this, asked this question, where and what group is preparing the youth for community leadership? I would like to connect with that group, he says. And this is, what group is preparing the youth for community leadership?
Okay, so if we could just go over some of the programs you referred. So we have what we call the Young Leaders Summit, and we take Muslims who are in, maybe last years of high school and college and maybe even postgraduate degrees. We take a group to Washington, and they go in the White House, and they meet with the senior staff of the White House, and they have a conversation. Then we take them to the Congress, and they do the same thing there. Then we take them to the federal agencies and think tanks and media. And this opens the eyes of people to see the opportunity. The secret in America for those who are successful in politics is that they see the opportunity. Communities that don't see the opportunity are helpless. We want Muslims to see for themselves. And so we take them there and they learn how to engage. Then we have something else called a Hollywood Summit, where we go into Universal or I was going to say Mickey Mouse, but Disney, or these other Mickey Mouse operations in Hollywood, and they sit with Hollywood producers, script writers, people who do shows, including Tyrant, including 24 Homeland. Those are the people that are making films and television shows about us. News tells you how to think. Hollywood tells you how to feel. And learning the mastery of creating stories to show people how to feel, Muslims should learn that art as well, so we can begin influencing in the future. We have a news media summit as well. So that's how we're engaging bringing in young people to learn to be part of these sectors so that they can gain influence. We have a stepladder approach. First you establish a presence, then you gain respect, then you gain acceptance to be at the table. Keith Ellison said, if you're not at the table of decision making, you'll be on the menu of that table. And then you gain influence. That's the stepladder approach that we're trying to teach all Muslims in being more effective at their work.
I would like to invite one of our youth here, Usama. We want to come and say what the youth are doing. I think this is important to hear the youth say something.
Rahmatullah. A better youth would probably be Asad. He was the president of the Muslim youth group here last year. But when do you guys meet? What are your meetings? Well, we have a Muslim youth group here that engages high school students mainly, and maybe younger college students. And they meet regularly, and they put on a whole series of events for this masjid for the youth and for elder people as well. So that's a great way to get involved if you're young and you want to get involved. If you're a little bit older, we have all of the programming, including this program, was formed by the programs committee, which is formed of young professionals. So like between the ages of like 20 to like 27. So really young people that come together, and we meet every Saturday at I think 11 a.m. In the Shura room, and of course it's open to the public. So if you're here and you have time on your hands and you want to do something for the community, there's a lot of avenues to get involved with. Come speak to me, come speak to any of the organizers here that you see, and we can point you in the right direction, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Right. So we also have a food bank. We also have a food bank thing here. Yeah, food pantry. And then we also get involved in the Second Harvest Food Bank for the greater community, and we go out every month and.
Yeah.
Big community leader.
Yes.
There's a bunch of stuff. That was brother Uncle Nayar Alam. So if you want to talk to him, he's a great resource to talk to. Jazakallah khair.
This is a proof that you can be youthful all the time. regardless how much gray hair you get. Some of the programs, I'll be very brief, some of the programs at CARE, many of you are very familiar with the Muslim Youth Leadership Program. Last year was our 10th annual program where we bring about 45 young Muslims, mostly high schoolers, seniors, or junior high schoolers to Sacramento, where they spend 4 days getting trained in public speaking, community organizing, political organizing, and they spend time actually in the Senate Hall, Senate room, sitting on actually each senator's desk, so it gives you the feeling of the power. You feel like declaring war on invading some country, because that's what senators do usually. Just kidding. State senators don't do that. But it's a good exercise of understanding our system, our political system, and knowing exactly what Salam said, learning the opportunities and the tools to achieving these opportunities. Another program that is a little bit more involved is the Muslim Game Changers Network that Sheikha Muslima mentioned, and Jazakallah khair, she is also helping with it with the Sister Zainab and others. It's a 4-month program where we go to a location, a masjid, and we work with the youth of that masjid or that community. We did one with Irvine community, and then now we're starting with Hawthorne and Lomita. It's a 4-month program every Sunday where they get trained into identity issues, civil rights, history of America, engagement. The key is to produce young activists who are leaders in their own ways, basically leaders who can lead their own community and inshallah the larger community. Another program is not for the youth only, for everybody in the community, is the MDAG, the Muslim Day at the Capitol, where we take community members. Last year we had about 200 people, actually almost 200 people last year to Sacramento, where also we lobby on issues of importance, not only to our community, but also to the larger community, whether it's issues of protection of privacy or civil rights, immigration, and so on. And it's a great opportunity, and mashallah, Brother Akhil, you've always been very active in politics. It's a great opportunity to link up with other groups and other communities on common issues. Because it was said earlier, I think by Salam and others, this is not an issue just for Muslims. You know, we are not going to provide the solution to every problem that exists in our country. We're only about 2%. And we're not the only ones who care about justice issues and social justice and fairness and equality and peace and harmony. Many others share these same interests. So the key for us is to learn how to work with others and build alliances and coalitions so we can work together on these matters.
Just briefly, I wanted to mention the importance of the masajid in interacting with all of these organizations and working with these programs is very important. The youth groups, that, as we mentioned, and as actually members of this masjid and also of the Muslim American Society, that actually encouraged me to go pursue my master's in screenwriting. So yes, so I think, you know, more and more that definitely that love that we get at the masjid, it permeates and it allows us to interact with all of these, you know, like MPAC and CARE, and you know, we have the Safa Center that just got started. I know that Brother Salam, you need to leave. Sister Muslim, would you want to?
I have to go to another state called Los Angeles.
Oh yeah.
Take a while.
Yes, you take the mic. Oh yes, please announce it.
Yeah,
yes,
sorry.
please announce
Just Dr. Mara Hathout, may God rest his soul, yarhamu, passed away last Saturday, and tomorrow the city of LA will have a memorial. And he is now being written about as the interfaith peacemaker, and really is the father of the American Muslim identity that declared that home is not where my grandparents are buried, but home is where my grandchildren are going to be raised, and so many other wonderful ideas and work. And he struggled with exactly the same issues. So the city of LA is going to dedicate tomorrow a memorial, not in terms of words, nothing, no artifact, but they'll have a memorial service for him, 1 p.m. City Hall in Los Angeles. So
Fantastic.
we have to go and prepare for that.
Yes, absolutely.
But all the faith and civic leaders and government people will come and speak
I
tomorrow.
really encourage all of you to attend. And Sheikh Muslim, you have a final comment, please.
This question about where to send young people, there are so many Muslim organizations doing amazing work with young people. AMPAC, CARE, the Garden Grove Masjid. I also wanted to encourage people to look online at the macro Muslim institutions, even if you're not going to join them, just to have this feeling of hope. Like there is amazing work that's being done. ICNA, for example, does amazing work with young people. ICNA Relief is probably one of the only organizations I've read about that is entirely about providing relief for poverty in America. It's a Muslim organization that only focuses on the local issues. MAS has different programs. ISNA has different programs. So I think it's good in general as a community that we're aware of what different institutions are offering. It doesn't matter if your kids are going to be involved in them, but just knowing that they're happening is something that's important for our morale. Just one last final point I thought was really important to make is that with all of this bad news that sometimes is in the media, I think also as a community we have to celebrate successes and victories and put the spotlight on that. So when CARE does something amazing, I really think we need to spend more time celebrating CARE successes or AMPAC successes than we'd spend sort of complaining about what's wrong. Because if we focus on what's right, that's a form of shukr. It's a form of gratitude to Allah, and whenever we have gratitude, He increases us in what we're grateful for. So that will actually bring more victories. So that's it. Jazakumullah khair.
May Allah reward all of you for coming. I want to thank all of you, our esteemed panelists, for attending and taking time away from their families. For you to come and to learn about how to deal with the crisis of ISIS, we hope that we have enlightened you and inspired you and educated you through this discussion, and we really appreciate your questions. And we hope you have a safe journey back home. And thank you again, Jazakumullah khairan, for coming.
Hey, thank you both. Hey, it was awesome. Thank you, sir. Yeah, it was really good. Yes, thank you very much. Bye.
I like your idea very much about counseling, having a counselor. Salam alaikum. Salam alaikum. How are you? Right, salam. Good to see you.
Talk some more. Good seeing you.
I want to connect with you if you have your card.
I don't have my card, but Marwa.
I want to know. Okay. And the reason is I want to be part of the
I haven't gone through the website yet, so I still don't know.
leadership to the kids in every city because we have city halls, we have commissions, I went through those things when I was young, so I can show them how to do these things, you know. Yeah, right. That's what I want to do. Okay? But I need to connect with you somehow. Okay, here, do one thing.
Okay, let me get your card.
Yeah, send me.
You know what? We have a table out front.
Oh, is that right? Okay, I'll do that.
They should have the cards.
But okay, that's good. I will look at it.
Long time no see. I used to see in Pasadena once in a while and on. Yeah, same here. Great to see it two times in a week. So, right.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Well, inshallah, I won't promise everything. Yeah.
Be there 12:30.
Yeah, I want to share something with you.
What?
A long time ago, I heard from an Iranian military general, which was my uncle. He was the commander-in-chief of the Iranian army under the Shah. This is back in 1979. He says that policies of the West is to create an enemy in the Middle East. And if there is none, they put one in. And that statement, I was a young kid. I never understood what that meant.
Until you see
Until I said so they,
Biden and ISIS and then this and
they
that.
brought
First it
in-
was Saddam and then it was...
first it was the shopping mall,
you guys maybe
and then they
like
brought
the
in
flow
the
of ideas,
clergy. I
not
said we're
talking
not
about
in
that.
the East or the West, and then they politicize Islam, and then they create Saddam, and they create Al-Qaeda, and they create all these things.
Well, nice
But
to
you guys
meet
have-
you.
you
Big
guys
fan
have
of
a-
yours,
Yes.
It's been a while I've been listening to you.
Thank
and
you.
Never got a chance to say
Thank you.
meet you in
I hope,
person.
I hope we all...
You know what? This is
Something
so
food
much.
for
I
thought.
learned
You guys really have a tough job. I mean,
Without Dr. Hatuk now.
yeah, I know.
Hey, here's the young man. Good to see you. Thank you. Congratulations. Good work. Thank you.
With all those FBI guys over there, I was just sitting next to two of them. I couldn't smell them. The guy, they were shooting the whole video, and then right after the meeting, they both walked out. Yeah, that's him all the time. But yeah, but you had some very good talks.
I wanted to talk in January now, and like,
I'm looking forward to it. I want to like get look into it. I gotta look more at the website. I was like in a rush, and then like I got off work pretty late, so I missed the programs and everything.
Mashallah, a very good topic. And it's really, I was going to ask you one thing, that how can we inculcate this activism in our youth? That's the thing which kind of really, I feel like we need to do more and more, and that's the only way we can get involved, mashallah. It's a good thing that you have pointed out, though. You have indicated about the civic engagement, philanthropic activities, but we think that there's a lot of room to be worked. Yeah. And it's, when I see the other like churches, organizations, we go to the food bank, and especially Oriental churches, they come like 70, 80, and we are struggling having like 30, 25 people. It's like that needs to be really worked. Wa alaikum assalam.
We have a young man selling chocolate for the school. Do you want to support leadership in our community? Let's do chocolate now. One chocolate.
I love Sheikh Jamal. He's awesome. I gotta miss him. What's he gonna do now? Are you guys gonna go still be around the masjid? I just don't see him enough. Ever since I work now, like I haven't seen him talk to him.
I'll take that.
Doing like a. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. But what time is it like? The thing is like the program has to start like a little later. Yeah, see, I'm still working at that time, so I missed a lot of the program. That's why I'm like getting more closer to this match too. Oh, Ricardo, he knows me. Yeah, he knows me. But yeah, so yeah, that's why I come here now more often because they have weekend programs. And I love that. And I didn't see that much in Irvine. Oh, okay.